think food is just food, Abby? Something to eat and forget? But what if I told you that one man's reckless love for food changed his life forever? And not in a good way. This is the story of Tunde, the man who couldn't resist any dish, no matter where it came from. And by the time he realized his mistake, it was too late. Too late to turn back. Tunde was the kind of man who never said no to food. Whether it was a steaming bowl of jollof rice at a wedding or leftover meat pie from an office meeting, he was always ready. His friends even joked, if Tunde Day, no food day waste. He would laugh it off, patting his round belly as if it was a badge of honor. One Saturday, Tunde attended a party. You know those Nigerian parties where the aroma of fried rice and chicken fills the air and the drinks never stop flowing? This party was one of those. Tunde arrived with a plan to taste everything, and I mean everything. Small chops? Check. Pepper soup? Of course. Jollof rice with a generous side of fried plantain. No debate, but something strange happened that evening. As he reached for a plate of goat meat, a woman sitting nearby gave him a peculiar look. Her eyes lingered, sharp and intense, almost as if she was warning him. Tunde paused but quickly brushed it off. "Na my life," he thought, scooping the meat onto his plate. The night continued, and Tunde ate and ate, his laughter blending with the party's music. But as the clock struck midnight, something changed. A sharp pain twisted in his stomach. At first, he thought it was just overeating. But this pain, it was different. It felt like his insides were tightening, like they were fighting back against everything he had consumed. Tunde staggered home that night, clutching his stomach. The pain came in waves, sharp and unrelenting. Maybe it's just the pepper soup, he muttered, trying to convince himself. But deep down, he knew something wasn't right. The next morning, his neighbor Mama Ngozi knocked on his door. "Tunde, you no go church today?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "You look pale." Tunde waved her off, mumbling something about needing rest. But the truth was, he couldn't move. The pain had spread to his chest, his limbs felt heavy, and his mouth was dry despite drinking water all night. By Monday, the situation worsened. Tunde finally dragged himself to the hospital. The doctor's face tightened as he listened to Tunde describe his symptoms. "You've been eating recklessly, haven't you?" the doctor asked, his tone serious. Tunde chuckled nervously, but his laughter faded when the doctor ordered urgent tests. As Tunde waited for the results, his mind wandered. He remembered that peculiar woman at the party. Her gaze, the way she seemed to watch him every time he reached for food. Was it just a coincidence, or did she know something? By evening, the doctor returned with the results. His expression was grim. "Tunde, your body is rejecting several things you've been eating. This is more than just overeating. It's a buildup of toxins. If we don't act fast, it could damage your organs." Tunde's heart sank. Food, the thing he loved most, had betrayed him. Or had he betrayed himself by ignoring every warning sign along the way? As the doctor spoke, Tunde's mind raced. It sounded like something out of a bad dream. He asked the doctor, "How bad is it? Is it just a matter of taking some medicine and resting for a few days?" The doctor shook his head. "Tunde, it's not that simple. Your eating habits have been out of control for a long time. Your body has been struggling to process everything. Right now, your liver and kidneys are under severe strain. We'll need to start treatment immediately." Tunde left the hospital with a bag of medications and strict instructions to avoid certain foods. But you know how it is. Old habits die hard. The first few days he tried. He drank plenty of water, avoided fried foods, and even started eating vegetables, something he hadn't done in years. But the cravings, they came like an uninvited guest in the middle of the night. One evening, as he walked past the buka, the aroma of pepper soup and fried fish hit him. He stopped, stared at the steaming pots and thought, just one bite won't hurt. The next thing he knew, he was seated with a plate in front of him, savoring every bite like it was his last meal. But that bite, it was the beginning of the end. That night, the pain returned, sharper than before. His vision blurred and his heart raced. By the time his neighbors found him the next morning, he was barely conscious. They rushed him back to the hospital. This time, the doctor's tone was harsher. "Tunde, do you want to live or not? You can't keep eating like this and expect miracles." It was in that hospital bed, hooked up to IV drips, that Tunde began to reflect on his life. The endless parties, the greasy takeout, the way he ignored every warning. How did it come to this? Tunde was trapped in that hospital room for weeks, and as the days passed, he began to feel the weight of his choices. The pain was gone, but the fear lingered. His body had started to heal, truly understood how reckless he had been. But it wasn't just about the food anymore. It was about control, about how he had let his cravings dominate his life, shaping everything he did. There were no more parties, no more late-night snacks, no more easy fixes. He had to face the consequences of his actions. Tunde's doctor, Dr. Olamide, was a no-nonsense type of person, a woman who didn't sugarcoat anything. She'd been with Tunde throughout his treatment, and now she was determined to make sure he understood the reality of his situation. "You need to make a decision, Tunde," she said one afternoon, her voice steady. "Either you learn to respect your body, or you keep living the way you have, and it won't be long before you'll pay an even bigger price." Tunde sat up in his bed, the reality of her words sinking in. He had no choice but to make a change. But it was easier said than done. His life had been built around indulgence, eating until he couldn't eat anymore, drinking without thinking twice. The thought of never enjoying his favorite meals again was like a weight on his chest. He remembered the taste of fried plantain, the crunch of meat pies, the rich aroma of jollof rice, and a deep part of him ached for those things. It didn't help that his friends were still living their normal lives, gorging on food and laughing at his new life. "Tunde, you don't change? No more food? So you no go enjoy life again?" They teased, unaware of what he was battling. But Tunde knew better now. Each day was a struggle to resist the urge to go back to his old ways. And each time he made the right choice, there was a quiet victory, but also a growing fear. What if he failed again? One evening, as he sat in his room, he had an idea. He would try cooking his favorite dishes, but this time, he would do it the right way. He would make healthier versions, meals that wouldn't damage his body. So he got to work. Tunde spent hours researching healthy recipes, swapping out unhealthy ingredients for better options. He grilled his chicken instead of frying it, used less oil, and packed his dishes with vegetables. He even learned to make a low-sugar version of his beloved tiger nut drink. The results were surprising. Tunde found that he still enjoyed the flavors of his favorite dishes, but now they left him feeling good, energized, not sluggish. And as he sat down to eat for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he was punishing himself. He was nourishing his body, but the battle wasn't over. Tunde had to stay committed. He couldn't go back to his old ways. He couldn't let himself slip back into old habits, no matter how much he missed them. The cravings still came, but now he had the strength to ignore them. And slowly over time, his body began to reflect his new choices. He lost weight, his skin cleared up, and he felt stronger than ever. But there was one moment, one decision that changed everything for Tunde. One night, he was out with some friends, and they were having a blast, as usual, eating and laughing. As the waiter set down a steaming bowl of pepper soup in front of him, Tunde hesitated. The smell was intoxicating. His hands itched to grab the bowl, to dive in. But in that moment, he remembered the warning, the consequences of his past indulgence. With a deep breath, he pushed the bowl aside. "Not tonight," he said quietly, and that was the moment Tunde knew he had truly changed. After that night, something inside Tunde clicked. The cravings didn't stop entirely, but his desire to live a long, healthy life became stronger than his need for instant pleasure. He could no longer let food control him. Every day became a battle, not just with the food on his plate, but with the deeper internal struggle. His past self versus the man he was striving to be. One evening, Tunde invited his friends over for a small get-together. It was a big step. They'd always laughed about his diet, calling it a phase, mocking him for being so disciplined. But this time, Tunde was prepared. He was going to show them how to enjoy good food without destroying your body. The night was filled with laughter, music, and of course, food. Tunde had prepared a healthier version of jollof rice, grilled chicken, and a vegetable salad. His friends were skeptical at first, eyeing the dishes with suspicion, but one by one, they took a bite. Wait, this rice na correct. How you take do am? One of his friends asked, his eyes wide in surprise. Tunde smiled. It's all in the seasoning and the love you put into it, he replied. You don't need to drown your food in oil or fry everything to enjoy good taste. As the evening went on, his friends began to open up to the idea. They enjoyed the food. It was flavorful, filling, and satisfying. No one felt sluggish or bloated after the meal. Tunde felt a sense of pride as he watched them, knowing that he wasn't just feeding them, he was teaching them something important. But the true test came the next day. One of his friends, Kola, called him up. Tunde, I've been thinking about that meal you made yesterday. You know what? I think I'm gonna try eating better too. Tunde felt a surge of warmth. His journey had not only transformed his own life, but it was beginning to impact others as well. Now, whenever Tunde feels tempted, he remembers that night. He remembers his friends enjoying the healthy meal, the pride he felt in knowing he was no longer a slave to his desires. And when the cravings come, he faces them with confidence. As time passed, Tunde found peace in his new way of life. The cravings, once so overwhelming, no longer had the same power over him. He wasn't perfect, and there were days when he slipped up, but he no longer let those moments define him. His relationship with food had shifted from one of indulgence to one of balance. Tunde's transformation wasn't just physical, it was mental and emotional as well. He had learned that true strength comes from control, not from giving in to every urge. He had learned that food, while important, shouldn't dictate who he was or what he did. His friends, too, began to see the changes in themselves. Some started eating healthier, others joined him in cooking more nutritious meals. They'd even started coming to Tunde for advice on how to stay healthy. What began as Tunde's personal struggle had slowly turned into a movement among those closest to him. One afternoon, Tunde sat down with his mother, who had always been concerned about his eating habits. She'd seen his transformation, heard the stories, and watched the way he carried himself now. Tunde, she said with a smile on her face, I'm proud of you. You've learned to control yourself, not just with food, but with life. That moment was the culmination of everything he had gone through. It wasn't just about food anymore. It was about mastering his own desires, making choices that respected his body and his future. And when he looked back, he realized that the true lesson wasn't in what he had given up, but in what he had gained. Tunde had learned that everything in life requires balance. No one should live to indulge in excess, but neither should they deny themselves the pleasures that life offers. It's all about finding the middle ground, respecting the body that houses the spirit, and making conscious choices every day. As Tunde stood at the kitchen counter one evening, preparing another healthy dish, he smiled. He had come a long way, and he knew this journey would continue. But now, he was in control, and he had learned the most important lesson of all. What you eat today shapes your tomorrow. And that, my friend, is the end of Tunde's story. Remember this, you cannot outlive your choices,